On my computer screen, so we are going to get started. Welcome, VEI and CMI alumni. We're so thankful that you've taken an hour out of your very busy days to join us for this Lunch and Learn on lessons in leadership. There are almost 100 of you with us today, so we're just blown away by the response rate. So that tells us that this is a topic that you are very interested in and certainly are drawn by the great panelists we were able to assemble for this event. So thanks. If you will please mute, it looks like most of you are, just so we can avoid any feedback. You'll see a note that we are recording this so we can place it on our YouTube channel for your reference or to share with others perhaps that weren't able to join us today. I also want to thank those of you who submitted questions in advance. We really appreciate that. We think that the questions we've prepared for our panelists cover some of those, certainly not all of them. We'll try to weave some of those in to this discussion today, but we may also find that we have content to support another discussion along the same topic. And I think Marilyn has just indicated, let's drop additional questions in the chat or follow up, and they will help me monitor that. So let's get started. I am Angel Deem. I work for the Virginia Department of Transportation. I am VDOT's Chief of Policy and a VEI alum and on the VEI alumni board as well. So we are very, again, grateful for your participation. So to get started, I'm going to introduce the panel members and ask that they respond to our first question after I introduce them, just so we can sort of get rolling right away. And I'll repeat the question each time just to reorient us. Okay? So first, we're going to begin with Lieutenant Colonel Keenon Hook. Welcome. Lieutenant Colonel Hook is the Virginia State Police's Bureau of Strategic Governance lead, which covers oversight of the department's high-risk functions. He began his career with state police as a trooper and then moved on to work conducting and supervising violent crime investigations, leading and overseeing division responsibilities in finance, training, information technology, human resources, and legal affairs. I don't know what you've left out. That seems to cover everything. So clearly you've done it all and have a lot of insights for our participants today. So our first question is, will you please provide us with one or two examples from your personal leadership journey that exemplify your approach to leading teams?
Sure. Yeah, I think one example that I have, I think might be a little bit counterintuitive because, we think of leading teams as leading the people who work for us on something. But I think one of the most formative aspects of leading teams for me is, throughout my career has been, how are you doing at leading amongst your peers? And I think, being able to do, if you can do that, then leading the teams that work for you is just a lot easier. So one example for me is being able to understand the challenges and opportunities that the other bureau directors and parts of the Department of State Police have, and where I can partner with them to achieve success. And so not that long ago, for instance, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the environment, I noticed that that a lot of our highest levels of leadership were bogged down in the weeds of decisions that could be made at lower levels. So just getting together with the other bureau directors, my peers, and the deputy superintendent, and talking through that problem, I tried to and was able to kind of lead us in a direction of advocating for and making changes in our decision-making model, where we now vest lower levels of commanders with more decision-making authority and more authority, and instead of everything just being reported, recommendations made up and up and up the chain until everybody's redoing the same work to reapprove the same decision. Now decisions get made where they should be made, and they simply get reported up for awareness to the higher levels. It gives us a lot of opportunities. Not only has that freed our leaders to focus on the bigger picture, longer term strategic vision stuff, which we needed to do, but it also gives us a lot more opportunities to mentor the commanders below us, because when we see things that, hey, you made a decision here and we can live with it, but think about this next time. So it's helping us really grow that next generation of leaders behind us too. And so I wanted to highlight that one, just because, again, I think being able to get those groups of peers together in opportunities for leadership is key.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that response. In an organization as large as the Department of Transportation, I think that those are tips that I certainly need to be reminded of. So thank you for that. Next, we have Dr. Gerald Lackey. He is the commissioner of our Department of Motor Vehicles, and as such, he leads DMV, which collects more than $3 billion, that's with a B, in revenue for the state's transportation network. He oversees 2,200 employees, which are dispersed across 76 customer service centers, 13 weigh stations, as well as their headquarters operation. He also serves as the governor's highway safety representative and chairs the Virginia Motor Vehicle Dealer Board. Prior to his state service, he's served as a vice president of business optimization at GAF and associate partner at McKinsey and Company. So welcome, Commissioner Lackey. And so to you, I'll ask for an example or two from your leadership journey that exemplify your approach to leading teams.
Thank you for inviting me, Angel. I appreciate taking part in this conversation. I think I'll stick to the example of the Department of Motor Vehicles, since we're talking to largely public sector folks here. But there's two things that I think are critical for leaders in being effective with their teams, especially when they step into the role new. And one of those is figuring out, how do you create an effective team environment? And every time a leader steps into a team, it changes that environment. So it's never a situation where you step in and the team environment is exactly the way it needs to be, because you are a new variable in that equation. And you're going to bring with you your own ways of working, your own beliefs on what effective looks like, your own expectations. And so there has to be a conversation, an ongoing conversation between you as a leader and that team in terms of what does effective really look like, and how are we going to negotiate that together? Because whatever it was before, I'm here now. And I think that is an important conversation to have explicitly with the team, and recognize that it's going to require the team to move somewhere, and for you as a leader to move somewhere, right? You're going to have to adapt your style to what does that team need, and the team is going to need to adapt its style to what your expectations are. So I think that's the first one. I will say, as an example, here you got me. Listen, I've done a lot of different things in life, but I've never been a public servant, and I never ran a Department of Motor Vehicles. I knew next to nothing when I walked into this role, and I had a team of people who have dedicated their careers to public service, and a lot of them 20 plus years here at the Department of Motor Vehicles, the gap between what they knew and what I knew was tremendous. So for me, coming from an environment where my style was a bit more, I knew the answer, I knew the content, to here where I had to ask a lot of questions, and I needed them to provide more of the answers. And I think that was a change for them because my predecessor had been here 30 years and he knew everything that they knew. So that for us was an explicit part of our leadership journey. The other thing I'll say is I think it's very important, and again, often undervalued, is creating a common purpose for the team. One of the things that separates teams from just groups of people who work together is some sort of a common goal or a common purpose. And well, you could say, well, do you have a mission and vision as a department? Absolutely. I mean, it existed before I was here. But if we all collectively committed to it, is it something we can all stand behind? When was the last time we had explicit conversations around why are we here? What is our purpose? What is the value that we create? And we spent, as a leadership team, like 8 months in several offsites and discussions recommitting to our mission. We made changes. They were in the 10% area, right? 90% of it stayed the same, 10% change, but that 10% was very explicit and meaningful to us, and we're able to each of us talk about why we made those changes. And we spent equal amounts of time talking recently about our vision, and even getting feedback from the top 75 leaders on what is really our vision as a department, what are we aiming to achieve, and how do we want to do that. So I think those two things, for me anyways, are some of the most important things leaders can do. Create an effective team environment, recognizing that they're a part of it, and do spend the time deliberately talking about what is your purpose. And whether you call that a mission or a vision or anything else, it is aligning that team around this is collectively why we're here and what we're going to deliver.
Great, thank you. I think that's something we can all relate to because we have that mission and or vision statement, but have we looked at it in a while? Do we own it? Are we sure all the members of our team are even exposed to it in a way that's tangible to them? So I really appreciate those remarks. But last but not least, we have Deputy Commissioner Necole Simmonds with us. She is Deputy Commissioner for Employee and Organizational Strategy for the Department of Social Services. So welcome. And in that role, she develops and activates initiatives designed to increase organizational health and effectiveness. She leads critical areas there, including public affairs or communications, human resources, and organizational transformation. So some big roles there. Previously, you were the Director of Public Affairs at DSS, if I'm reading that correctly. And then prior to state service, Necole has held several corporate leadership positions, including a Vice President of Business Development, a Director of Marketing, and a Business Development Manager, and also worked at the CIA. Super interesting. So again, welcome. Thank you for being here. And please round us out and provide us with your examples that exemplify your approach to leading teams.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for having me. My approach to leading teams, throughout my career, I think I really looked at the different leaders that I reported to. I think we all do that, even if it's subconsciously, and we see characteristics that we truly admire and aspire to, and we see some characteristics that make us pause and reflect and say, I'm not, I know how this style makes me feel and how I respond to this style, and it shapes whether or not you take that into your own personal leadership style as you grow in your own career and as a leader. And I recall years and years ago, I had a CEO that I reported to that often told people to stay in their lane, right? Just stay in your lane. It was almost like a trust me, just stay in your lane. And I noticed that for folks that are inherently curious and observant and resolve oriented and creative, find it very difficult, to just stay in a lane and not say anything or do anything about things that are outside of your area or may have an impact on your area. And so as a leader myself, in my personal leadership journey, I never want folks to only stay in their lane, right? I want folks to cover their lane that can be granular enough to cover their lane. But it's more important to me that people feel empowered to ask questions, empowered to make recommendations, that people feel, free to volunteer to sit on committees or a sprint team to help solve problems, to, have a bigger picture. So that's something that's always stuck with me. I want to make sure that those that I am leading feel empowered to make their voices heard, in a variety of ways, even if it's outside of their traditional area. I always say that I'm looking for thought partnership, and I don't care where it comes from, right? Like, I want people to notice things that I don't notice, offer a different perspective that may not be inherently mine, give me an idea or a recommendation, and I'm open to it all. Another really quick thing is that I carry with me in my leadership journey is being hyper aware of what I demonstrate. I had someone, a past peer who was also a leader, says, leaders don't often realize that we are constantly on stage. And even when we don't realize that we're being watched, we're being watched. Our actions, behaviors, our word choices, how we speak to others, how we speak about others. These are all very important things that we demonstrate daily. And so I've learned to be hyper aware of what I'm demonstrating to make sure that it is reflective of the values that I say I have and that are important to me.
Great, thank you. I'm so busy listening and taking notes. It's almost like the three of you collaborated, because what a well-rounded response to that question, and some themes that you all sort of wove between your answers. So glad we're recording this. So, okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-facilitator. Take it away, Antonio.
No worries. Thank you. Commissioner Lackey, we'll start with you, and then we'll open it up to our other guests. Question: how has remaining curious served you as you've taken on progressively responsible roles?
First, let me just underscore what Deputy Commissioner Simmonds said, because that whole point about being on stage, so critical. And I will tell you, just informally, that's what's tripped me up sometimes in this new role too. I'm a much higher level of visibility than I was before, and I'm like, oops, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way, or didn't. Yeah, it's so key. We are on stage all the time, and I think even at lower levels with your team, you are on stage all the time. So I think that's a wonderful point. You also said something that I think relates to my answer, which is she wanted to create an environment where her team feels empowered to speak up and ask questions. To me, that's one of the reasons staying curious is so important. You create that psychological safety. If you're the type of leader that always has an answer for everything and always has a judgment, that's a good idea, that's a bad idea, okay? Rather than, oh, that's interesting, like I see some challenges with that, how might you see it? Do you see it differently than me? You're not really creating that environment if you're not staying curious. Somebody who has all the answers does not invite people to speak up with alternative suggestions. The other thing for me throughout my career being curious is help me remain humble. I think this is really important too. The higher you get. When I became commissioner, I became a funnier person. I became infallible. Like, no one ever says, Commissioner, I wouldn't have done it that way. And they never not laugh at your jokes. And I think if we don't find ways to stay humble as leaders, we're going to lose ourselves and our own egos. And being curious is a great way to do that. You could do it at work by, again, resisting the urge to make a statement and pass a judgment. Instead, ask a question. And let the other people take it where they want to take it, even if you've solved that problem before and done that work before. You don't need to be the know-it-all. I also find it helpful, to be honest with you, in my personal life, to go do things that keep me curious, things that I have to become a beginner at, things that I've never done before that I'm not good at, whether that's scuba diving or truck driving or anything else. Like, it's important because you go back into that learner mode and you're like, wow, yeah, there's a lot I don't know out there. And, you learn about yourself in that mode. The last thing I would just say on curiosity is, I think it goes hand in hand with creating psychological safety, but you create leadership bench strength. When you ask questions and you stay curious, you're inviting others to learn how to problem solve, think, and stand up. So anyways, that's my thoughts on curiosity.
Thank you. Deputy Simmonds?
I agree with all of that. Being curious does keep you humble. It does allow you to laugh at yourself. And I think, again, when we all have, I'm sure, organizational core values and personal core values. So I think in one of those, whether it's personal or organizational core values, there's this, concept of continuous improvement and continuous learning. And you can't demonstrate a core value of continuous improvement and continuous learning if you're never putting yourself in a situation where you're curious or asking questions. So again, that sort of goes back to, what are you demonstrating as a leader? And I think being curious in meetings and conversations demonstrates that commitment to continuous learning. And in terms of the part of the question about, how has it served you in progressively responsible roles, I know I personally have a tendency to do what I call rabbit hole work, right? Because none of us founded the organizations that we work for, right? So we're inheriting teams and decisions and policies and practices that we didn't develop or create, right, or establish. So when you're looking into something and then you peel a further layer and another layer and another layer, and before you know it, you're sort of becoming your own encyclopedia or your own, sort of SME on something, because you're really that curious that you have to get to the root of an issue to the best of your ability. And so I enjoy rabbit hole work, and I encourage others to do rabbit hole work, because there's, such value in that discovery process. But again, it has to come from a place of curiosity. So I think that was a great question, and I think it's a great discipline of leadership to stay curious.
Yeah, we should probably look at T-shirts. Stay curious, my friend. All right, Lieutenant Colonel Hook. You're on mute, sir.
There we go. All right. So first off, I love that answer, Necole. It really resonates with me as far as, some of the things that, that I've seen and done over the course of my career. And I want to come back to that piece. But before I do, I think it helps me to frame leader curiosity in terms of its opposite for a second, because I think we've all seen and we realize that, even in high level positions, like, it is possible to do those jobs and not do them well, but it's possible to do those jobs and be incurious and merely, a policy gatekeeper or a rubber stamp in certain ways, where you're disengaged from from the bigger picture needs of your employees, needs of the organization, and looking at things very narrowly. And I've always felt like one of the most important things for a good leader is that curiosity that helps you gain insight into, hey, where are the opportunities to really advance the goals and objectives of the agency? And to Nicole's point, a lot of times that involves falling a long, long way down a rabbit hole in figuring things out that may not be just may not be obvious to you from where your starting point was. And so, Angel jokingly mentioned my varied career roles at State Police, but that's happened to me numerous times, but I think the best example and kind of one of those light bulb moments in my leadership role was when I was promoted into a position within our Criminal Justice Information Services division and had no background whatsoever in information technology or even the business end of that. And honestly, I spent the first 15 months in that job almost miserable because I'm not comfortable if I don't have a reasonable command of what's going on and understanding of things. And it's highly, highly technical environment. And at about the 15-month mark, like the light bulb went off and I realized, wait a minute, I understand this enough now to start asking those questions. And immediately from there, it was we're off to the races because now I realize, oh, here is how I can use this technology or this role in technology to help us make some changes and implement some things that will enhance public safety in other places. So, once staying curious kind of helped me to realize where I had the opportunity to lead and influence and make change rather than, just be kind of at the outside looking in and thumbs up, thumbs down without understanding things. I think if we're going to grow and learn and help our agencies grow and learn, curiosity is right at the heart of it.
Agreed. I think listening to you all just kind of makes me think when we talk about curiosity and staying curious, that leads to process improvements, right? When you look at what is happening before you and internally, you're probably asking the question, why, then what if, and why can't it be? So those are some dynamic answers, and thank you very much. All right, I'm going to transition over to Angel for the next question.
All right, thank you. I love that. What I heard was, first, I love that now I have rabbit hole work as a term, and I am totally using that. But what I heard is too a balance between that and humbly asking those questions, right? So thank you for those insights. All right, we're going to stay with you, Keenon, for the next question. And this is one that I know I'm particularly interested in. I'm interested in all of them, but especially this one. And I'm really curious to hear how this balances out because some of you have been with state government a long time, others not. But describe as best you can, and from your experience, how you've navigated the changing views among administrations and how you equip your teams to remain successful. And if you don't have that every 4-year swing that many of us have experienced, then perhaps from your the rest of your experience, you'll have something similar that you can draw from. So we'll start with you, Keenon.
Sure. So yeah, obviously, I've been around the department for quite a number of administrations. I haven't tried to count them up, but really in a leadership role that's had to interface with the shifting political winds for, 2 governors' administrations and several changes in hands in the General Assembly. I think the key is, because the point of the question, let me say, is it's chaotic, right? There are different. There's those changes are always going on, and the pressures for our agencies to change in response to changing political environments can be tremendous and sometimes exhausting. But I think the key is there's always a North Star in this environment, and that is the agency's goals and needs, right? They, whoever comes and goes in those political roles, the agencies aren't fundamentally changing, and those who have been around in leadership in those agencies long enough to assess what those are and kind of fix a direction, that it's important to stay aligned with that. And so for me, what changes is not what our resource needs are, what our opportunities to grow and improve and do our jobs better are. None of that changes. What changes is how you're going to help whichever administration see where those opportunities align with their broader goals and things. So it really is, in my view, just a matter of identifying those areas where you can find common ground with whatever administration or General Assembly stakeholders or whoever.
Great, thank you. Necole, would you like to bolt on to that?
So those were two very powerful and apropos words that you used, Keenan: chaotic and exhausting. And it is, and we also have to remain mindful that it feels chaotic and exhausting to those that we're leading as well. So it's not just what we're doing at our level, and we tend to have a closer proximity, but that those feelings of uncertainty and insecurity, cascades down to the people that we're leading, and they're relying on us to maintain some sort of, I call it, like, a cultural identity, right? Wherein, sort of, despite who comes in and the changes, that we should, as an organization or as a division or a portfolio or a team, have our own sort of cultural identity, that we remain who we are and we remain committed to our customers, clients, stakeholders, and each other the way that we always have. And I think it's important during times like that we remind folks to lean in, and not withdraw, and give them the safety, the psychological safety to express their fears and their concerns, and also for us to be able to validate that. So I think the work that we do with changing administrations in terms of education and patience too, because it can start to feel, repetitive once you feel that you have an understanding, and now there you do it again to make sure that everyone, understands, and that there's buy-in and support. So yeah, it can feel a little heavy at times, and it goes back to that demonstration. What are we demonstrating during change? And what's that impact on those that are looking to us? And I just find that, again, just remaining focused on the mission, remaining focused on the commitments that we make as a portfolio or division or team, and lean into each other, and we'll be able to navigate the change together.
Great, love that. Yeah, I love the reminder, and tying it back to our first question, that as leaders, we're always on stage. So it's really important that we maybe give even more attention to helping those that we're leading stay on level ground, and be assured that we're going to weather this, introduction or the exodus, wherever we might be. Thank you for that. Commissioner Lackey, I'm really curious to hear your take on this question.
Well, I've only been here a year and a half, so I'll give you an analogous situation, because if I'm blessed to move to the next administration, as the head of the agency, that is a determination that's outside of my control. I am doing a lot of asking. So now I have Keenan and Necole to go reach out to and ask what that's like. But I have to imagine it's similar. I have in the private sector been a part of a CEO transition as a senior executive member. And it feels more like that. I mean, the more extreme version would be a merger or an acquisition. I don't think it's quite that big. That's like a complete fundamental change in your culture and who you are as an organization and what you stand for. I think, as Necole and Keenan said, we have a lot of those roots as agencies, right? And the Department of Motor Vehicles has been here for 100 years. And what we do is well established in code, and how we do it is also well established. So I think there's some fundamentals of the organization that will stay there. But anyways, when I experienced as a senior executive a CEO change, the question really was, I was brought in by the previous CEO. So I was, quote, his guy. He knew me, he liked me, he hired me. Now I got somebody else in there who the board made the decision. They wanted to change direction. They brought in a completely different, personality. And that happens in the private sector every 5 to 6 years on average is how long CEOs stay in their role. And so there's this period shortly after of like, of I think mutual self-evaluate or mutual evaluation. Like, do I like this guy? Can I get on board with his vision? Does he like me? Can he trust me to carry out what his vision is? It really does get down, at least in my experience, at the most senior level, to a factor of trust and alignment. And can we really work together to accomplish something, or is this just not going to work? So, not as insightful answers as Necole and Keenon for the organizations, but I think it'll be interesting to experience my first one coming up here in about a year.
Well, thank you for that. And that's a good tidbit there that CEOs on average transition, you said every 5 to 6 years. That's good to know. I think I'll use that in encouraging my teams as we head into another transition in the not too distant future. Antonio?
Antonio, we're having some trouble hearing you.
I should take myself off of mute, right? Let's try this again. Before I get into the next question, I'd like to piggyback on something the commissioner said about the transition. Our people have to have faith or trust in their leaders, right? And if they have that faith or trust in the leaders, oftentimes they're more likely to stay. So in your example in the private sector, when the new CEO came, you had to do some self-evaluation because the prior CEO, you had a certain relationship, you were his guy. The new person, how does that work? And I tie that back into what the deputy said, as leaders, we live a life on a stage, and do our people have trust in us? So I think that was very insightful. So thank you for sharing that. All right, the next question, and I'll open it up to all of the panelists. And maybe just to get us started, Deputy, I'll ask you to kick us off. But the question is, share with us how one mentor or role model has shaped your career. Now, share with us how one mentor or one role model has shaped your career.
Thank you for that. So my first commissioner when I joined the Department of Social Services prepared me for that new role that I was coming into with such transparency. She made a conscious decision to say, Necole, listen, I'm going to share the good, the bad, the ugly, and the very ugly, right? She did not feel as though I would be as successful in that role as I could be if I did not have that level set, if I did not have that context. Maybe there would be some things that I would take personally that had nothing to do with me. Maybe there would be some dynamics or scenarios that I would misinterpret or misunderstand because I didn't have the background and that contextual knowledge. And so, she made a decision to say, listen, I'm going to give you all of this transparency and all of this candor, and I trust you with this information because I want you to be successful, and I don't want these things to be a distraction, right? And that was really a wow, moment for me. And then as I navigated, those early, weeks and months as I was getting acclimated, so many times I would say, wow, she told me this would happen, right? Or wow, this is exactly what she was referring to. And I felt so prepared for it. Sometimes it's, the bumps in the road are not a big deal if you know they're there, right? It's when you don't know they're there and you don't expect them that they can cause damage. So I was just always grateful for that insight and that extra layer of preparation. It's like she armed me with good information to go forward, and I'm still here 11 years later, right? And I attribute that to her trust in me to be honest. And so I've definitely, over the years, as I have hired folks and built teams, I make sure that to the best of my ability, I'm making sure that I provide transparency and context and background, and that I'm preparing folks in their role to be as successful, as they are. And we talk about buy-in a lot. We need buy-in, but we don't always talk about what buy-in requires. And buy-in requires understanding that context. Buy-in requires transparency, and so that's just something that I model because she showed me how effective that is as a technique, and I've been doing it ever since.
I like that. Buy-in requires transparency. There's some great quotes. That might be another one we might want to put on the T-shirt. Right. Lieutenant Colonel Hook, you want to share your insight?
Sure, I will. Yeah. So first off, I like that Necole mentioned not only her experience with her mentor, but also how she tries to now mentor those who are coming up behind her. Because I think, and this goes to my ultimate answer, but that to me is the biggest key, because all of us are, we're honestly, we're never really qualified for that next job we're stepping into, right? The reason we get it is because we were very well qualified or very accomplished at the previous job. And so, there's this expectation that we will. But when you get into those new roles, you don't know everything you need to know, including about how to be a leader. So, I've found this to be more or less true throughout my career, and it certainly is now. I mean, if you ask me, as you did, about a mentor who shaped my career, the first one that comes to mind is my current boss, the deputy superintendent here at Kirk Marlowe, because as I stepped into, and he was my boss for a while in my previous job as well, and especially as I stepped into that role, which was a very big transition from my previous one. I very quickly learned from him something that hadn't really been a part of my toolbox yet, which was the paying attention to how everyone on your team, they all think differently, they lead differently, solve problems differently, interact differently, and you need to understand how all of those resources can come together, and how to anticipate, like how to draw the most out of each employee. And I think some of Nicole's answer kind of spoke to that too. But like in my case, Colonel Marlon knows that, hey, I am inspired by having a problem to solve, but I need a thought partner to kind of really, really stress test it and work through some of the challenges and everything like that. And so he and I partner in that way. But with other employees, he's going to draw them in a little bit differently to be for us to all be a cohesive team. And it just, I'm an introvert at heart. So it helps me to see that model from him every day, so that I can go, oh yeah, I need to be attentive to how everybody else is thinking and responding on the team.
Great answer. Thank you for the insight and sharing. Commissioner?
I had a mentor when I was an academic before I went into business, and mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was a social psychologist. The person who gave me my first opportunity to move into business also followed me for 10 years of my career at the consulting firm. His name was Bill. And I can point to a dozen things that Bill taught me, but what he fundamentally taught me, first of all, was how to not be, when I first into business, I was insecure, and that insecurity came out in talking the most in every meeting, and saying the least. And it also came out in, I came out as very cocky, and very know-it-all. I did not have a strong ability to create followership with people when I got my first manager role at the consulting firm. For me, it was a lot about, okay, now I'm going to prove to you I'm the smartest person, and I'm going to be able to issue the best directives and therefore get the best results for the team. And maybe I'm a slow learner. It took Bill 10 years. But I think little lessons that I learned along the way, it's not always about you. You vote with your feet. Right? Let your team shine brighter than you do. Leaders shouldn't be the brightest shiny star on their team. I think everybody, to me, should have a mentor. And I think, no matter where you are in your career, because you need somebody else to sometimes help you look at your own ways of showing up on stage, going back to Nicole's comment. I think that's going to be one of the key takeaways today. Somebody has to be in the audience to help you see yourself sometimes. And I think mentors play a very valuable role in that. So I encourage everybody to try to find mentors wherever they are in their careers and work with those folks.
Thank you. Another one, you vote with your feet. If I do decide on a side hustle, it might be making T-shirts. So thank you.
Giving you good material.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to transition over to Angel for our next question.
Okay. Yeah, and we're rounding out the hour. I'm happy we've gotten through what we've gotten through thus far, so we'll keep on pressing. So this next question, I'll start with you, Necole. As leaders, we know we have to carefully steward culture within our organizations to attract and retain talent. I always tell folks it's a very tenuous balance. You really got to be thoughtful and attentive there. So how do you put care into the center of your leadership style, and what tips might you share with us along those lines? And I'd like to add something. One of our write-in questions asked for tips for virtual leadership communication. So for any of you, if you have thoughts or want to focus on that, I think that's of interest to our participants today as well. So Necole?
I love this question. How do you put care into the center of your leadership style? We have a core value at DSS, and we have 5, but the first one is people first, right? And that includes employees, not just customers, but people first. And when we're talking about attracting and retaining talent, it is extremely difficult to have highly engaged, high performing talent when you are unable to demonstrate to them that you care about them as a person. If they don't feel that you care about them as a person. And, as a leader, it's crucial to determine the needs of your employees. There's no singular employee profile. Literally everyone is different. So you can't have a blanket approach to leadership and culture. You can't just have one style or one technique. You have to leverage all the styles and all the techniques, right? Some people respond to recognition and praise, and some won't. Others need your time and your attentiveness, right? Others need your understanding and leniency when they have personal hardships. They need to see that you were able to show up for them when they needed it. And then those are the people that I promise will run through a wall for you when the time comes. Some people need coaching and mentorship, like we just talked about. So it's really important to, take the time to evaluate the needs of your direct reports and make sure you're being responsive to those needs. And then the hope, of course, is that they will demonstrate that same pattern and use that same approach for their direct reports, which, in turns affect culture. But we talk about this at work a lot, and many of us have probably heard of, the love languages, right? So there's quality time and acts of service, and that helps us navigate personal relationships. It's the exact same in terms of your leadership style, right? You're not gonna have a response from someone by giving them flowers if their love language is words of affirmation. I need to hear it. I need you to articulate that, I am valuable, right? And so that stays with me in terms of making sure that the people around me know that I care about them as their leader. And that starts with taking the time to assess what personally motivates them, and what they are most responsive to. And then we get to the high performing, highly engaged, committed, the performance focused, resolve oriented, but you will never get there if folks don't feel that you care about them as a person.
That's right.
Agree 100%. So I'll open it up, Keenan or Commissioner. Either of you want to chime in on this one?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. That was a staring contest. Yeah, I think I think Necole said it quite well, but I think one add that I would have on that as well is I try to make sure that we'll do two things. Remind myself that when I'm talking to anybody in my organization, that they are fully capable, creative, self-sufficient human beings first. And then they're playing a role for me second. I do think organizational cultures have this weird tendency that, like, when you walk through the door, you're suddenly more affiliated with whatever job duties you're performing than anything else. And because of that, we listen to people who are at different ranks differently. We have a tendency to not listen as carefully to people who are lower in this imaginary hierarchy than we do those who are above it. So I think caring to me also means seeing that person as a whole person, and whatever they're talking to me about, not letting a title or a position color how I listen to them. Just listen and engage with them. The other thing that I think it is to demonstrate that there are no roles in my organization that I'm not willing to do. If a trash can is tipped over and there's trash on the floor, I'm going to pick the trash can up, put trash in it. I think demonstrating to people that every job is valuable and you understand it because you're willing to perform whatever job is also an important aspect of caring. So I think it gets what Necole was saying too about treating people as whole people. And there are subtle but highly important ways that as leaders we can do that. And I think the listening to them without regard to their title and demonstrating that every job is as important as every other job and making the organization function are two very important ways that we can create a culture of caring for one another in accomplishing whatever we're trying to do.
Well, I'll piggyback on the end and say, yeah, I knew if I just stayed quiet, Commissioner Lackey and Necole would say it all. And I really, I've not only do I fully affirm that answer, I've taken notes on that answer, and there are things in there that I need to be reminded of every day. There's one aspect of it I think that is just like I'm more aware of in my own role, again, without detracting from any of the necessity and probably primary necessity of just connecting with those around us as people and understanding them and their needs and what makes them tick and everything else. I think that is the biggest part of it. For me, the easiest way to show it, because again, I'm not like my first executive role in this department, I replaced somebody who was super engaging and funny and made deep and lasting personal connections everywhere he went. And whatever skills I have, that's not at the top of my list. But that doesn't mean I care any less, right? So one of the ways that that I tend to really try to show that care in my leadership style is by being attentive to the to the challenges that folks have in their environment at work, and understanding that in my leadership role, I have the influence and the access to resources to sometimes make their jobs a lot easier, right? So just kind of being willing to, Commissioner Lackey talks about picking up the trash, but getting into the weeds with them on a project they're working on and understanding, hey, that seems like are you having to do this that way or lacking these resources? Sometimes people don't know to ask, and you can just get things done to help make people's jobs easier. And I think in most cases that's just that's another way to just let them know you care.
Great. All right. Well, we are coming close to the end of the hour, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time and certainly the time for our panelists. So we'll set aside a prepared question that we had because I don't believe we have enough time to really dig into it. But we did receive, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, some great questions from participants that we'll be holding on to. Don't you worry, we'll be holding on to those for future sessions. But I want to get through one, maybe two, we'll see. I'll watch the clock. Rapid fire questions for our panelists. So, these are just first thing that comes to mind, really quick and succinct. So let's see how it goes. So, and I'll, at least the way you're presented on my screen, we'll go Keenan, Commissioner Lackey, and Necole. Does that sound good? All right. First one, give us one tip on how best to succeed in Virginia government.
Pass.
That's an option.
Yeah. For me, I know I'm already failing at being short, but being a problem solver, right? We've got so many impediments in our environment that we encounter every day, and just staying at them, thinking, well, why not? There are ways to overcome this. That's probably my biggest tip.
Great.
Don't fall into the trap of interagency finger pointing. Figure out if there's a problem that exists between two agencies, get together with that other agency and make it your joint problem and solve it together.
Awesome.
And I would add, in addition to problem solving and don't point fingers, that a key component of problem solving is actually creating pathways. And so that's something I think is a success factor, not only in Virginia government, but everywhere, that when you're focused on problem solving, focus specifically on creating a pathway to the solution or the desired state.
Like it. All right, next. Hardest challenge you faced as a leader. So not how you resolved it, but just so we can all empathize and know that we're in this together. Hardest challenge you faced as a leader.
Is that me again?
You get to go first each time.
Okay. Adapting, I think, is, we in sessions like this, we all learn an awful lot, but then taking that and deliberately making it a part of your toolbox to change how you work and not stay in a default mode that's easier for you.
Like Keenan gives me time to think. I guess I would say not being so hard on myself and others around me. I drive pretty hard, and I think it's a constant struggle for me to balance that with what's realistic and what's possible. Give everybody, including myself, a little grace.
I think the hardest challenge for me is just access. It's just being as accessible to others as they want me to be is just incredibly difficult. The number of pings I've gotten just in the last hour of, are you in the office? Are you in your office? Can you call me? Can I call you? It's just so access and that can wear you down if you don't have a way to sort of balance how accessible you are to others versus the time that you make sure you devote to yourself. So that's a big challenge.
So Necole, if you want to sidebar on that later, I would love
Yeah.
to hear more.
Tips, I'll take two.
But yeah, speaking of utilizing these tools in the toolbox that Keenan mentioned, remember we recorded this session for all of our participants. So I know I am going to go back and listen and digest. Again, thank you so much for joining us, VEI and CMI alum, in this Lessons in Leadership Lunch and Learn. And thank you very much to our panelists. So I hope you all have a fabulous rest of the day, and we hope to see you at our next Lunch and Learn. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody.